Welcome, everybody. Dr. Grace Telesco. We are live streaming from Abraham Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice at NSU, Florida. And I'm a full-time faculty member here at NSU. I'm joined tonight by a very special guest, Dr. Fleur Amanda Williams from the Department of Justice and a graduate of NSU School of Criminal Justice. She received her PhD from Nova, and I'm very, very, very proud of her. She was one of my students, and her research, she's going to talk a little bit about her research tonight, but let me just tell you that Dr. Williams is employed with the Department of Justice and is extremely passionate about social justice. As I said, she completed her PhD at NSU and her master's degree at the University of New Haven. Her primary research focus is on first-generation American-born women and the effects of intimate partner violence. She wants to affect change by educating our local, state, federal, and other nations on social issues. And so please help me welcome Dr. Williams. And I'm going to start off by saying, I'm going to brag on Dr. Williams a little bit because ordinarily you work with a student, a doctoral student, and there's a lot of back and forth. There's, drafts and the proposal stage and then the dissertation stage and all of that. And then you finally get to the defense. And by that point, you're sort of saturated with all of the information, having read, several times various drafts. And I want to just say that Dr. Williams' defense was one of the most fascinating. And she's so articulate. She's so comprehensive in her research. And so you are in for a big, 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 big treat tonight. And since this is really a grad spotlight, we want to sort of focus on what your journey was like, how you got to this PhD, and maybe your selection of NSU, even if you wanted to talk about that, what that process was like, and give you a chance to talk about your experience there. And then I'm going to ask you about your actual experience as a doctoral candidate and as a doctoral student. What was it like finally, crossing the finish line? How long did it take you? What are some of the strengths and the weaknesses of a PhD student? Like, some tips, especially for, I'm hoping that some of my PhD students will be on. I'm hoping that other doctoral candidates are watching and that you could provide for them maybe a little bit of advice, some tips. So we'll start with your journey in general. How did you get from the beginning to wanting to pursue a PhD?
Thank you, Dr. Telesco, for such a warm and very detailed welcome. Definitely, I would say that I'm a student of life. I definitely am very passionate about education. And upon finishing my master's degree, I began to look into doctoral programs because ultimately my passion was to conduct a study that would influence not only my generation, but many generations to come, and also to be influential in the development of education and also being able to affect change in different fields such as intimate partner violence, which is a topic that I found to be really important and sort of shunned and not really spoken about. So I began to just kind of breathe and just kind of think about getting into a doctoral program, but also understanding that there was a certain level of commitment that needed to be there and making sure that I was prepared for that journey. And I had gotten to a point where I was just like, why not? Let me just shoot my shot. And I submitted only one application to Nova Southeastern University. And it's like, if I get in, I'm going to go for it. If I don't, then I'm just going to try again, but maybe at a later time. It might not be the right time right now. And a few weeks after, I received a acceptance letter, and I was like, whoa, they accepted me. And I was just really excited. And, by the grace of God, I began the program in, I think it was 2006. 17. And I was just really nervous because I hadn't been in school for about a year and a half. And I was just, taking it one day at a time and just trying to get myself acclimated and just being a student and just really enjoying and soaking in the knowledge and the experiences from other doctors that were my professors. And after that, once classes were over, I was like, oh, it's time to pick a topic. And I was all over the place at first. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to focus on, what my topic was going to be. But I knew that whatever I picked, I needed to be passionate about. And I wanted it to be something that would shed light on a topic that was not very often discussed. And for myself, before joining the Department of Justice, I used to work with women who suffered from substance abuse and also domestic violence, which I found to be really something that was underspoken about, something that wasn't discussed, something that people try to put under the rug, and even families were not really discussing it. And I kind of took a step back and was like, wow, this is definitely a topic that is not really often discussed, and why not shed light on it? And coming from a woman, it might be received very well. So I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. So at first, my topic was super broad. I wanted to touch on women from all over the world. And my chair brought me back down to earth, like, hey, you can't talk about the whole world because you're going to be doing this research for forever. So what areas are you passionate about? And being a first generation American, and also having a background from being from West Africa, Ivory Coast, I felt that while I was skimming through many research topics, I didn't find a lot of research on West African women, and more specifically, didn't find anything on first generation women, such as myself, and how their cultural experiences influence who they are as individuals, which also is very prevalent on who they become in society here in America. So that's how I ended up narrowing my topic down and just got the ball rolling from there.
So tell us, you said you only applied to one school. What made you? What was the focus for NSU? What made that appealing? Like saying, "Hey, this is the school that I want to go to."
So NSU was a school that one of my colleagues was actually attending, and she spoke very highly of the program. She talked about the flexibility and being able to go to school full time online. And at that time, I wasn't sure if I could commit to going to school in person due to my workload and being a full time employee and also a full time student. So I needed to find that good balance where I can be able to do both at the same time. And NSU was just perfect in terms of being able to mold my schedule around my work schedule. And even if I was working, still being able to get my work done. And I also loved the enthusiasm of the staff being very personable, being able to talk to the chair and being able to talk to different professors before even starting the program. And they were very involved in getting you admitted into the school. It felt like a personal experience and not just a number. You weren't just a number 6,000 or a number 10,000. You were that individual that they took the time to really get to know and talk to over the phone for an interview. So I thought that was really personal, and I really enjoyed that.
Awesome. I'm gonna share a personal little story for a minute, and I share this sometimes with my doctoral students. Um, I went to Fordham University in Manhattan. My PhD is in social work, and I think you know this already, Dr. Williams, that my dissertation was on domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and so like you were looking at a specific population, a study population, so was I. I was also interested in knowing what were some of the factors, explanatory factors for what makes someone a batterer. And so I looked at personality factors, and I also looked at relationship factors. Anyway, my first doctoral course, and I don't know, maybe I shared this with you, maybe I didn't. You can stop me if I've said it already, but I'm hoping that our viewers who are doctoral students or thinking about becoming doctoral students will get something out of my sharing this story. So my very first course in policy, it was one of those courses where the professor, you went, it was not an online class. It was, everything was on ground there, brick and mortar. And I just loved the lectures. I loved her lectures. Oh my God. Dr. Rosalind Trinesky, she turned out to be my chair later on. She just was so fascinating, and I would take notes and was getting so much out of it. But there were really no assignments. There was only one assignment, and it was a course paper. And you did that at the very end. I did it on leadership, and I handed it in, and it was like one of those things where, it's right before the break, you hand in your paper, and you give them a self-addressed stamped envelope, and you get it back in the mail. I open it up. I'm so excited. And I got a C. And in the doctoral program, you can't get a C. So that means you have to take that class again. And I immediately called the professor, not to challenge the grade, but I was so upset that I felt like I had made a mistake coming into the doctoral program, and that I wasn't doctoral material, and I felt like that. And I felt like that for whatever those belief systems are that we buy into, that you're not smart enough or you're not good enough or whatever it might be. So the very first sentence that comes out of my mouth to Dr. Trinesky is, I think I have to withdraw from this program because I'm not doctoral material. And she says, your paper is not doctoral material, but you are doctoral material. And she gave me a chance to redo the paper, and I redid the paper, and I got a B. And she was absolutely right, and it was kind of like my first paper. So as a doctoral student, when you hear my story, does anything resonate for you in your experience or the experience of your colleagues, of your classmates?
I definitely can relate. My first semester, I had a similar experience. I turned in a paper. We were allowed to turn it in 2 days before the end of the semester. I turned in this paper. I was super excited about the topic that I had selected. And I received the paper, and actually, not even the paper, I received an email, and it was, well, if you do not redo this paper or fix it within the next day, you will get a C in this class. So I'm freaking out because it's my first semester, and I'm like, oh my God, am I good enough? Should I stay in the program? Am I competent? Maybe this was a mistake. I'm in over my head. Maybe this is not the right time for me. And I remember staying up for I want to say 13 hours straight and redoing this paper, and just so much anxiety and fear, and just being doubtful of myself. And I turned it in, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to turn it in. And I received a B on the paper, but for me, a B was like failing. It still didn't feel right. And I was just like, this B is bothering me. And my mom was saying to me, she's like, well, sometimes you just can't be perfect at everything. And I'm like, this B is bothering me. And I had to come to terms with myself and understand that this is a process. This is something new. is not a master's degree. It's not an undergraduate degree. It's a doctoral degree. And if you're not challenged, then you do not appreciate the hard work that comes into it. And from that point on, I realized that this is something that you want to do and that you're passionate about. You're going to commit your full heart to it, and you're not going to half do the work or half step anything that you will put into this program. And from that semester, I told myself that if I'm not putting my all into it, then I'm not going to do it at all. And that was I think the turning point for me was for me to really take a step back and realize that you're going to be challenged, and those challenges, embrace them, because those challenges will make you stronger, and those challenges will push you to the final steps. And that's the mentality that I had throughout the program. Every time I was faced with adversity or a challenge, I just took a deep breath and just started troubleshooting and just jumping over hurdles, because ultimately I knew what my final goal was. And that was to receive a doctoral degree and to also have a study that would be effective, and a study that will also influence other doctoral students and also influence other generations to come.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's so funny that we have this parallel story. And I don't think I know that story. Did you I don't think you knew my story either, really. Right? So that's kind of cool. But one of the biggest things that I learned from that experience, it was several things. One is that it's all about what I believe about myself. It's all about, I was a first generation to receive my bachelor's degree and then a master's degree and ultimately the doctorate. And I'm a kid from Brooklyn, not a kid anymore, but a Brooklyn cop, blue collar kind of civil servant, and so I don't fit the typical mold of an academic, if you will, right? So all of those things were playing against me because I felt like I didn't belong, or I felt like I didn't fit in. And you hit the nail right on the head about, and I say this to my students all the time too, we're sometimes perfectionists, and we're perfectionists because we're trying to undo some damage that's happened, back in the subconscious, right? So we're trying to prove something to ourselves, even, and that sometimes doesn't play well for us, because it was okay to get the B. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think that anybody cares. Hey, Dr. Telesco, what did you get in that policy class? Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares that I ultimately, what my GPA was at the end. Nobody cares. Really, nobody cares how long it took me, you know? Um, Nobody asks me those questions, right? They look at what you've accomplished, and the beauty of being called doctor, right? Dr. Fleur Williams. So that's like a big lesson. But the other big lesson, and this speaks to research, is that this leadership policy paper was about 20-page paper, and it was really just a literature review. It wasn't a study, it was just a literature review. And she asked me, she said, how much time did you really spend researching this subject? And I said, oh, I really was like almost insulted by that, because I felt like I had really done a lot of work. And she said, well, how come you don't ever mention Fiedler? And Fiedler is the father of leadership theory. And I was like, oh, that's when I realized a literature review needs to be extensive, and it not only needs to be extensive, but it needs to be informed by those founders, if you will, in the field. So tell me, I know you're going to tell me this. I can bet you're going to say it. Who is, for you, in your literature review on intimate partner violence, who would you say are some of the movers and shakers in research around domestic violence, intimate partner violence, just generally?
I think social learning theory was definitely one of the theories that I applied from Banner 1977. I think that was like one of the driving points, because they talked about patterns of behavior and how your direct experiences can affect who you are, and you are a learner of by observation. So you learn through observation. And within my study, my thought process was that you are learning through your parents, you're learning through their experiences, you're learning through your community, you're learning through your educators, everyone that's around you. So the mindset and the thought processes that they have an influence on your mentality and things, that behaviors that you adapt. So if within your community, battering is acceptable and it's something that many people accept and don't even discuss, and that women are put in a certain place where they are to be submissive to their husbands and their spouses, then you are also, as a child, you were taught those lessons. So as an adult, when you are married, you adapt those same behaviors. So then that gets passed on from generation to generation. And you continue those behaviors until someone in the family breaks the cycle by learning from a different source.
Right, right. And we also know, we talk about, learned behavior. There's also learned helplessness, because so many people will say, well, why do victims or survivors of intimate partner violence, what makes them stay? Why would they stay in these relationships? And we know that learned helplessness is one of those factors. Do you want to speak about that a little
Yeah,
bit?
definitely. I think learned behavior, learned helplessness. I think it's also important to look at finances as well. Sometimes these women are put into situations, like if they're immigrants, they may not have all the resources, or they're being threatened by their spouse for any sort of reasons, or even the household. They may threaten to take their children away from them if they do not stay. So there are many factors, and you can't really pinpoint and tell a person why is it that you stay, because everyone has their own reasons as to why they stay. But you can also look at reasons why they do walk away, being able to change things in their household, and also giving their children a better life and a better future, essentially, and teaching them that, you know, intimate partner violence is not okay, no matter what type is occurring. Like you have to be able to speak up, stand up, and also speak for yourself, and giving
Yeah.
that woman a voice.
Yes, yes. So tell us little bit about your research. Tell us about, what you found. Um, of course, we know we always start with the literature review, which is what is already known in the subject in this field. What do we know about the study population? And then once the researcher, poses here's the problem that I'd like to examine, then they begin to find out what is already known, and then building upon that and informed by that, create the next part of this, which is, well, what do I think, or what's my hypothesis? So if you want to talk a little bit about your research, I know that we would all love to hear that.
Okay. So going through the literature review, I realized that there was many things discussed about women in general, women and intimate partner violence around the world. But to dive even further, I found that there wasn't much literature out there on West African women, and when you talk about West Africa, there are many countries that are composed within West Africa. You have Senegal, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Guinea Bissau, and just to name a few of them. And each of those countries hold their own type of cultural differences. And I found that, but aside from just different cultural experiences, they all shared similar cultural experiences in terms of how their marriages occur, putting men on a certain pedestal, and the man being the alpha in the relationship. So the purpose of the study was to gain insight on their children. So their first generation American born children living in the United States and how their West African culture influences who they are as first generations and living here in America, and to also identify risk factors of victimization. So I was able to speak to different women from different countries, such as Ghana, Nigeria, and Ivory Coast, and discuss a little bit about their upbringing, their cultural experiences, what affects their families, and some of the themes that we talked about that were prevalent in all of the women were cultural traditions. So when we speak about culture, we talk about engagements, their marriage traditions. So how the man will go to the woman's family to ask for her hand in marriage, talk about holidays, naming ceremonies, their definition of intimate partner violence. And we found that many found that families were part of that intimate partner violence, close friends, and also their partners. So whether it be their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend. And we also realized that it also influences how they are as people and the importances that they emphasize on culture. So culture being something that's very important and something that they want to preserve, even though they're still living here in the United States, and being able to bring their spouses and significant others into their culture. So some of the major findings that I found was that culture was perceived as being important, but sometimes viewed negative because of the prevalence of physical and emotional abuse within the society and within the cultural norms. And they found that many of the family members knew that abuse was prevalent in the family, but it wasn't discussed. It was not to be spoken about. Children were to know their place and not discuss anything that was family related. And you were not allowed to even bring law enforcement or anyone outside into that mix. And once a woman was to leave her significant other due to abuse, the society and the little culture clusters that were created within the United States would shun her, and she would not be accepted within that culture anymore. And they would not allow her to be a part of events or just anything that had to do with bringing everyone within that same culture together. So higher education was something that was considered a resource for many of these first generation women. They found that once they went to college, they were able to gain a different perspective on intimate partner violence. And what I found to be really interesting was that some of them didn't even know what the term intimate partner violence was. They didn't know that there were different types of violence, such as physical, emotional, verbal abuse. And many of them just labeled everything as just being abuse in general and not really focusing on that. The emotional part and the verbal could be significant and also be viewed as abuse. They only focused on the physical and not the emotional and the verbal. And the 11 women that participated also shed light on how important it is to maintain culture, even though they're not born in West Africa, but also maintaining a sense of pride and a sense of self and being able to connect themselves back to their culture. So they definitely wanted me to emphasize that although there's intimate partner violence within their culture, there's still a beautiful side to the culture in terms of all the norms and all the different cultural gears that they wear, and just being able to have a sense of self and a sense of identity, which was very important to them.
Were you concerned at all when this is your interest lies here, and this is a problem that was absolutely valuable and worthy of exploration? So you can understand the rationale for wanting to do this study. Was there any kind of trepidation or concern or worry on your part that this might make West African women look bad or West African culture look bad in any way?
Yes, I definitely had reservations at first and was nervous because I didn't want to make the culture be perceived as negative or shedding just negative light on it. So my objective was to not only talk about the intimate partner violence aspect, but to also shed light on the cultural beauty of it and being able to have people understand that there is a balance between the violence and also the beauty of the culture. And I found that these women also were a little bit hesitant at first to fully share and to be fully engaged in the topic. But once we were able to get into the conversation, they became more comfortable and also spoke a lot of their culture and how important it was to them. So I didn't want to like be biased, so I definitely kept my own opinions out of the study because I am a first generation West African woman. So it was definitely important for me to really keep my bias um, to the side and let these women really share what they wanted to share.
Well, it's also interesting because just the very nature of our conversation right now is indicative of institutionalized racism, um, in that when we're looking at partner violence in white people, in the white culture, and European, let's say, European descent, we're not concerned that that's going to make put a blemish, let's say, on white people, right? So what's your take on that, like in terms of the dominant discourse and dominant culture, and the inherent racism in our system, and how even as researchers we have to be careful, um, not to broad brush stroke any particular group, but yet there seems to be sort of a white immunity, if you will. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think with Africa in general, people are tend to look at it as the underdog. So when you talk about topics that are prevalent there, even if they're prevalent in a different country that may be seen as like a first world country or a country of power, it doesn't have the same effect. When you look at Africa, people tend to shun down on it and not look at the beauty, the riches, the everything that's culturally rich. And so shedding light on a topic such as that, it's like another arrow that you're putting on that country, or you're just shooting it down even more. And so I think that's where a lot of hesitation comes from, sharing topics like that or even just shedding light on it. And also even the first generation women not wanting to shed piss poor light on their country and their culture. So that's another target on their head. Oh, yes, that's Africa. So that's typical, which it's not, because a lot of things have changed, but we also can't stray away from pointing to things that are important to highlight.
Exactly. So examining these issues are so important. We don't want to put our head in the sand about it. My research, in my dissertation, was on same-sex domestic violence, and same kind of conundrum of, in one respect, people who are in same-sex relationships are seeking legitimacy because they've been marginalized, they've been otherized, disenfranchised in many ways. And so if we're wanting to focus on marriage equality, well, then now's not a good time to be bringing up same-sex domestic violence kind of thing. But at the same token, there's a silencing then that happens. And so in same-sex couples, they might be afraid to call the police, they might be reluctant to seek services, because of the stigma, or because of a double stigma, if you will. So kind of a correlation a little bit between what you're talking about and your research and mine. And what I wanted to ask you was, how did you go about recruiting your population? your study population, your respondents?
So I started off very broad. I reached out to different sororities that are part of the Divine Nine, which is historically African American sororities and fraternities. So with the sororities, I knew that I would attract different women. So I reached out to presidents of the chapters and had them disseminate it to their chapter members. And then those chapter members then proceeded to share with their own friends and family and associates. And the study just went from there, where different people that had no affiliation with me began to take part of the study and agree to be a part of the study, which I found to be really interesting, because my fear was that it's such a heavy topic that are women going to be willing to be verbal about it? Are they going to really truly engage in the conversation and shed light on it? Or is it something that I would make them uncomfortable, where they wouldn't want to share details of intimate partner violence that is occurring in their own families? But I found that these women were very willing to share once they knew that their names would not be shared. And they began to talk more and to discuss their family dynamics, how intimate partner violence has affected them, things that they've seen as children, how it's influenced who they date, how it influences who they are as people, how it also influences the men that they choose to bring around their family. And it also shed light on how observant they are. So, like, I saw this happen to my mother, so I'm going to be vigilant and not let it occur to me. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to have a voice in my relationship. I'm going to let my spouse know what my expectations are. And I think they use it sort of as an empowerment, now having those skills of being knowledgeable of these different issues that occurred as children. They use that as an empowerment skill for them to better themselves within their own relationships.
Yes, yes. And your focus of your research was heterosexual relationships, heterosexual intimate partner relationships. And also your focus was on the male as the batterer. Yes?
So I
So
kept it open. I didn't specifically choose the type of spouse that the individual would have. I was open to same-sex couples, whatever the participants. The only stipulations were that they needed to be first generation American born, they needed to be from a West African country and fit within the age scope. um, and pretty much I did end up with just heterosexual couples, but definitely the focus was on men being the batterers and not the women.
and so tell our viewers who may not be familiar with the literature and with the data that's out there about intimate partner violence, is it always a male batterer, or do females batter too?
Yes, females definitely do batter their spouses as well. But in the female spectrum, it's more of females um, being revengeful. They're either on substances, or they have been battered by their spouse, so they kill for revenge. So that's where most of the battering or the killings come from when it comes to women and intimate partner violence. And for the males, it's more of a dominancy, being dominant, controlling their partner, and having a controlling narrative of the relationship. So it's not always just the man beating on the woman. The women can also beat on a man.
Yes, and because we understand the difference in size and the physicality aspect, when men batter women, and women being the survivor or victim of the battering, the damage, the physical damage is much greater.
And with women, it's usually with weapons compared to a man.
Excellent, excellent. Now, when we talk about abuse, we're talking about a whole bunch of different categories, if you will. And we know that psychological abuse could be as damaging as physical abuse. And you mentioned, financial dependency, which can also be a weapon that's used in terms of why a victim or a survivor may not be able to get out of a relationship because of financial dependency and maybe even financial abuse. Um, what do we know about psychological abuse kind of being the setup for physical abuse?
I think most relationships do start with the psychological abuse, belittling the individual, making them feel that they are less than. Once you have that brainwashed into a person's mind that they're not adequate enough to complete anything, or that they need to depend on you as the provider and that you have no options, then at that point you're able to seclude them from their family, seclude them from everyone, and then also inflict abuse upon them physically. And
Yes.
at that point you have already belittled them, where they feel like they have no choice but to stay. So they will subside to anything, physical, emotional, verbal, and they'll just be there because they feel like there's a certain level of dependency on that individual who's doing the battering.
Right. Of your study population, were there any people who, as a result of the study itself and this coming to light and their own awareness and their own consciousness around battering and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, do you have any instances of where somebody said, you know what, I realized that I'm in this relationship and I need to get out?
I had one participant who, after completing the interview, she said to me off record, she said, "Wow, I really think that I was in an abusive relationship before. Now, just going through this conversation with you, I really think that I was in a verbally abusive relationship." And she was like, "Thank you. I definitely gained a lot of insight from just talking it through." And I think sometimes we just kind of go through the motions of life and we don't take the time to listen to and also feel what may be occurring in our lives. And I think that I gave her that space and that time where she was able to reflect and say like, wow, like, yes, this did happen to me. And we're not only talking about my childhood and learned behaviors as a child, but we're talking about me as an adult and what I tolerated and allowed someone to do to me.
So there's such value and sort of secondary, like a secondary outcome that of the research that you may have, really saved a life there. Um, so the research itself is so valuable. So at the end of the data collection and at the end of the putting together all of the findings and what they mean, their implications, how how does your research inform future policy, future research? What would be like a part two to this if you had a part two chance? And also, how does this inform practice in terms of resources and social services, etc.?
I think first generation born American women definitely had a limited awareness of intimate partner violence. So I believe that society and different communities need to place more resources and provide women the space to be able to discuss these different various topics, and to also shed light on what intimate partner violence is, because they may just see it as just a topic but not really understand the depths of what it is. And on a local level, they need to provide advocates, people who've been through these different experiences, so that they're able to have somebody that's relatable, and also being informative to local and state law enforcement, where they're able to recognize those signs and provide different type of services, instead of just either removing one person from the home or arresting one person, and then once the person comes back out, they will eventually find their way back to their spouse or significant other. So we need to find better practices in terms of long term and not just the short term fix.
Yes, yes. So now you are with the Department of Justice, and there might be some clearance issues that we may not be able to speak about at this point. But how can you bring your research into your work, if at all?
I think some of the first steps that I have done was sharing just the findings with a lot of my colleagues and who work directly with victims, and having them use this as a resource for when they're dealing with women from West Africa, and just being able to also apply it to women from other countries as well. Because yes, the focus of the study was West African women, but this is a topic that affects women all over the world. And the concrete information doesn't just apply to West African women, it can also be applied to European women, Asian women. So being able to share this research with them and having them use it as a resource has definitely been something that has really made me feel good, because I've gotten some really good feedback from them reading it, and just more information for them to internalize. And I definitely want to see this go further. I would like to share this study with more people, not only on local levels, not only on federal levels or state levels, but beyond that, and having other countries take a look at it and being able to apply it to their communities there, and also share with their local, state, and federal law enforcement. Because if we all work as a team and as a nation and as different, like with the United Nations, I feel like we're able to spread that awareness to even further and reach a bigger global spectrum. And with that, then we can affect more change, and not just on a local level.
Exactly. I think that that was one of my my comments at your defense was the United Nations. I could see you, you know, speaking and doing a presentation or a workshop at a conference somewhere at the United Nations. And so speaking of post defense and post doctoral, um, is there's an article here, isn't there, or a book perhaps?
Article for starts. I'm definitely right now in the works of getting this published and being able to share with other doctoral students, other students in general, and having that research be something that they can use as a reference. So,
Excellent.
it's in-
Excellent. Yeah, I really look forward to reading that published work. So if you were to mentor an incoming group of doctoral students, because I know I actually have one of my students is on here. I see that Summer is here. And one of my master's students, Caleb, is also, Brock is also on. But Summer is a first year doctoral student. What can you, if you were to speak to her directly on tips, suggestions, um, any kind of mentoring that you might be able to provide, what would it be about being a doctoral student?
I think the first thing is take your time, be patient with yourself, allow yourself to make mistakes, learn from them. Um, don't let a setback stop you. Continue to be motivated, driven, and know what your end goal is. So whatever that end goal may be, always have that as a focal point. For me, I definitely wrote down what my end goals were, and every time I was stressed, I felt that I couldn't do it, I would look back at that end goal, like this is what I want to accomplish. You're this many months away from this, you're this many years away from it. Like, don't ever turn yourself away from what your passion is and what you want to accomplish. um, Definitely committee wise, pick your committee very wisely, because your committee is that driven force behind you. They can make or break your research, and they can also either help you and guide you, or drive you in the opposite direction of where you're supposed to go. So making sure that you take your time to pick your committee, and your committee aligns with what you want to do and what you want the your research to speak to, because your committee ultimately will sign off on this and they will be a part of your study. So you want to make sure that you are picking them wisely. And also time management. This whole process has taught me that time management is very important. And also working full time and being a doctoral student full time, I had to learn how to balance family, how to balance my schoolwork, and also how to balance work, and making sure that I'm giving my attention to everything that I was doing 100%. And also, once you're in a program, being confident that you didn't just get there by mistake. There was something in you that they saw to get you to that point. And because they saw that in you, you need to also see that in yourself. And that will be your driving force.
Right. So you talk about how do you select a committee? Like how do you even start with that?
So for me, I actually went on the NSU website and I'm like, okay, this is my topic. Who aligns with my topic? And I began to reach out to a couple of different professors that I knew I wanted to be a part of my dissertation. And I started off with one committee, and that didn't go as planned, which was just a minor roadblock. And then Dr. Telesco jumped on my committee and pretty much had speared everything and got things moving for me in terms of being able to get through hurdles and get where I needed to be. And that's what is important. I think also making sure that your committee is committed to your study and committed to your research, and you as a doctoral student that they're mentoring. And I can't remember a time where I didn't send an email and I didn't get a response in like less than 2 days. She was on vacation emailing me back. I remember you were on vacation. You were like, I'm on vacation, but I'm going to email you back. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, that's important. And I think that we're really blessed that at NSU. I've worked at other institutions where it's sort of like you said, a bad committee member can really hold up the works. And if you're not responsive, you have to be responsive. You have to be able to, of course, life comes up and there's other things and there's other commitments. And if you have a lot of doctoral students that you're responsible for, it's hard to, keep up. You have to keep up the pace, and you want to give every student that opportunity, to get the most out of your feedback. So you want to really thoroughly, comprehensively read everything, especially methodology stuff. I know that some of my students have difficulty with just some of the basic stuff. Like basic stuff, you have to really be able to do your own work around that. But what does basic stuff mean? Well, APA format, grammar, style, proofing your work, like that's I would say that those are tips that I would give to doctoral students, is to say, make sure you proof everything before you hand it into your committee. Your committee shouldn't be your proofers. You should have a proofer before that, before it gets to that place. And pick a methodologist. So if you're doing qualitative research, you pick someone who's really well versed in qualitative analysis. If you have a statistician, because you're doing quantitative, that's awesome. And then of course someone who's an expert in the field, so expert in that particular discipline, whatever that is, that topic that you're looking at. So for example, Lenore Walker is one of our faculty at NSU, and when I brought up learned helplessness, she's the mover and shaker around learned helplessness, and has written many pieces on domestic violence. So you'd want to have somebody like that, for example. Perhaps if you're doing something on policing, you want to make sure you have maybe a practitioner or a policymaker. So these are just some tips that I would give to doctoral students, is when you're picking your committee, you don't just want a rubber stamper, because there's a lot of levels. Dr. Williams would attest to this, that there's a lot of different levels in the process. So, once you get past the hurdle of your committee, then it goes to the program director. And that program director, as we know, Dr. Marcelo Castro, is brilliant genius extraordinaire. And you're not going to get anything past him unless it's pretty near perfect, right? And but he's also such a great guide and such an amazing educator. So he doesn't expect that you're going to know everything. He's going to help guide you through that process. Has that been your experience with all of us?
I definitely feel that I was guided. I knew that I could just reach out and ask different questions, but I also found that Dr. Craig also provided me with many books for me to use as research base and to also educate myself on areas where I wasn't the strongest. And she would randomly send me a list of books like, hey, check this out. This may help with your research. This may help with your writing. This may help with proofreading. So I think it's important to have people jump those hurdles with you and also give you tools to also self-help yourself and
Yeah.
not just rely on them to do everything, because at the end of the day, this is something that's driven by you and you control your research.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that we at NSU, we want all of the students to succeed. And it's not a hazing, like some doctoral students might feel in maybe other universities that there's just like all of these hurdles that the committee keeps putting ahead of you, and it's meant as a hazing experience. But I think that here at NSU, we really, in our college, especially in the College of Education, School of Criminal Justice, that we're looking for the student to succeed. We're looking for the student to learn, and really to kind of mentor the student, guide the student, teach the student. It's all of these components together. So tell me about your aspirations for academia.
I'm looking to eventually become an adjunct professor. My interests are intro to criminal justice. I'm very passionate about influencing undergrads, and I do want to further pursue my research that I already started, getting it disseminated to different agencies and having them use it as a tool, and also being guest speaker to present this research and to share some of the information that I acquired throughout the year.
Yes, great. Well, there's a couple of comments here. There's a couple of people that are live with us that I want to recognize. Um, Dr. William Hawks, we want to thank you so much for being here with us. He is. I just want to read one of his comments for you. He's enjoying the event. Good evening to everyone. We have Dr. Jacobskind is here, and also we have, as I said, Summer, one of our doctoral students, Caleb, one of my master's students, and Orlando Padilla, who's the president of the Sociodrama Club, Stage for Change, and Jessica Rodriguez. Also, and so I wanted to just give people and Carice Grant is also here, one of my students, and also an adjunct professor here. Carice says, Dr. T, I think the new term for that feeling is imposter syndrome. Once we shake it off and embrace the challenges that come with the journey, we are able to see our self-worth and purpose. Absolutely. There's a book that I'd love to write someday when I have nothing else to do. And it would be GED to PhD. I don't know if many people know this about me or not, but yes, I have a GED. I didn't formally graduate from high school for some family reasons beyond my control, but that didn't stop me. But you see, remember earlier when I was talking about those voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough, so that when I get that C in the doctoral program at Fordham, I immediately go to that imposter syndrome that Carice is talking about, right? So it's true. I felt like a big fraud. It's like, and still till today, make myself vulnerable here. Still till this very day, there will be times where I feel I have to keep talking to myself and saying, "You belong. You fit in. It's okay." And that academia is it's a beautiful it's just this beautiful environment to be able to learn and grow and have lots of different styles. So I'm so glad that you're interested in academia, and I'd love to see you definitely be teaching maybe for us. We have to talk to Dr. Castro about that. I know that Dr. Kimberly Durham, our dean, is on. She's watching on the YouTube channel, and she's very proud of you, Dr. Williams, extremely proud of you. And I'm just so grateful to all of the folks that are here, Dr. Hawks, Dr. Jacobskind, Jessica, Carice, some of my students, Norlando, Padilla, Summer. And I'm wondering if Summer and Carice, since they're doctoral students, at least that I know of, if they have any questions for Dr. Williams. Now would be a good time for you to write in some questions in the chat box. Dr. Hawks says, kudos to Dr. Williams. Also, this work is tremendously important. Congratulations on your successful defense and professional accomplishments.
Thank you.
And we'll be able to go back and look at the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel. And for those who have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Obviously, you're watching now. All you got to do is just go up and hit subscribe, and also hit the bell, the notifications bell. So this way you get notifications every time we go live. So Dr. Williams, last words. You get the last word. What if anything do you want us to know about you, about your research, about the topic of domestic violence, about West African women, anything at all that you want to say as your as last words?
I would just say that I'm extremely proud of the study that I conducted. I put a lot of work and time into it, and I was extremely happy with being able to talk to different women, gaining different perspectives, and also learning more about different cultures, and also learning more about myself as well throughout the process. And I've gained so much from this dissertation, and this experience has been phenomenal for me. And I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. And I think it was a journey worthwhile. And I've gained so much insight that are beyond what I went into the program with. And I'm like forever grateful to NSU for the experience and this degree. And I think I would put this one on the pedestal over all of them, because it has taught me to never give up and to really be persistent with my intentions and persistent with my goals, and to not stop until I achieve what I needed to achieve. And this past August, I was really proud of the work and being able to finish that. It brought me to tears, that dissertation day. And I'm really grateful for you as my committee chair, and for the rest of my committee, and everything that you guys have done throughout the year for me.
Well, we love you very much. Love you very, very much. And very, very proud of you. And, you did the work. So we just helped guide, but you did all of it. And I'm just so glad that you said yes tonight to come on on our YouTube Live, and to be one of our graduate spotlight guests. And it seems like all of my all of my students are thanking us and saying it's wonderful. And in fact, Carice says my question was getting over that hurdle of questioning yourself and finding the right committee members. And Dr. Williams, you answered it perfectly. I appreciate it. So thank you all, especially to our dean, the dean of Abraham Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice, Dr. Kimberly Durham at NSU, Florida, to my associate dean, Dr. Marcelo Castro, and all of our faculty and all of our students at the School of Criminal Justice, and my behind the scenes guys, my production team, Joshua Enfinger, senior undergrad, CJ. We're trying to get him now to get into the master's program, and David Troxel. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and I nominated David to receive that Veterans Award. He was nominated. Other people won, but in my heart, he's the main winner, David. So thank you, David Troxel. Thank you, Joshua Enfinger, and thank you to everybody who's been on tonight, helping us with the chat. And we love you, and we hope that we see you soon, Dr. Williams. And I hope to read your article very soon.
Very soon.